You have to understand to the Mi'kmaq, this isn't just about money and jobs. This is about a way of living, practice of something that's been passed down through generations to generations. And what we've heard from some of the leadership is there's no money that they can put on the table that they want to see their rights sold or infringed.
Tensions remain in a Nova Scotia community where last week a First Nation became the first in the province to launch its own lobster fishery. That sparked anger and protest from commercial fishermen who say self-regulated fishing in the off-season will decimate an already vulnerable lobster stock. The dispute has even led to some confrontations.
Exactly. Well, then get the out of here then. I'm not leaving. Well, we ain't going anywhere either, man.
Lock it up, watch out! Get back, lock her up! Lock her up!
The First Nation says a 1999 Supreme Court decision, known as the Marshall decision, gives them the right to catch and sell lobster. That ruling affirmed the Mi'kmaq right to earn, quote, moderate livelihood from fishing.
And our band finally launched Livelihood. So to be the first people to do it, it means something to us, right? It opens doors for the rest of us.
But what exactly a moderate livelihood means has never been clearly defined federally, and Indigenous leaders say the federal government's need to define it is well overdue. So, is the federal government close to resolving this conflict? Bernadette Jordan is the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, and she joins me from the House foyer. Thank you for being with us, Minister Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
Now, there have been confrontations. There are issues of people's livelihoods, their Indigenous rights, all at play here. Obviously, a lot of big stakes. And I wonder what you see as the biggest risk as the parties involved try to sort this out.
So I think since day one, my biggest priority has been making sure that people stay safe on the water. And thankfully, we're seeing some de-escalation now. This is going to be something that's going to take ongoing conversations to get through. And we've already started those conversations with First Nations as well as with industry. And it's extremely important to the people in the communities to make sure that we come up with a solution that keeps everyone safe and keeps the fishery sustainable.
Yeah, and you talk about how this whole conversation has evolved. I want to ask you about something that you said on September 17th. You said, until an agreement is reached with DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, there cannot be a commercial fishery outside of the commercial season. Now, that was September 17th. Is that still your stance right now?
So right now what we're doing is we're working with the First Nations to make sure that we implement this moderate livelihood. This is a right that was affirmed by the Supreme Court of Canada under the Marshall decision 21 years ago. We know that it's taking a long time to implement that right. We're going to do everything we can to work with the First Nations communities. We actually are now having very positive conversations with them, with Sabaganagati, as well as Potlatech started their moderate livelihood fishery today. We're going to continue to work with those First Nations to make sure that we do have that right implemented.
But I don't hear you repeating that there can't be a commercial fishery outside of the commercial season. Your stance in that has changed, or at least softened, it seems.
We are working with the First Nations to make sure that they have, nobody's going to argue with the Supreme Court right that they have to a moderate livelihood fishery. We want to work with them to make sure that we implement that right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that particular right to a moderate living. Do you expect that these conversations, these negotiations that you're having right now, are they going to sort out this issue that has been ongoing for, as you say, such a long time? Will it sort out what a moderate livelihood means, or is this just about resolving this particular situation? What's the end goal here?
You know, the goal is to make sure that we implement the right because, as you said, this has been 21 years. There has been progress made with a number of changes and things that have happened over the last 21 years to help work with First Nations. But we have to make sure that we find the path forward that makes sure that the fishery is sustainable. We have shared common objectives with regards to conservation. We know how important this is to First Nations communities, and we want to make sure that we get it right.
Implement the right, but does that mean define the right? Define that moderate phrase?
I mean, I think implementing the right is actually what is going to give us clarity around the issue. This is something that the First Nations have been asking for. It's something that the commercial harvesters are asking for. It's something that we as a government need is clarity around what does that look like. Making sure that we implement that right, working with the First Nations to do it is something that's extremely important, and that's what we're going to work towards doing.
Well, to that point, I want to play a clip for you now from what AFN Chief Perry Bellegarde had to say, how he characterized this issue yesterday.
You've got a Supreme Court decision through the Marshall decision 21 years ago that recognized First Nations people's right to fish, and it said for a moderate livelihood. So it's been taking DFO 21 years to get to the table to define that. And that's what the issue is. It's taking too long to fully implement that treaty and inherent right to fish for lobster.
So I want to be crystal clear. 21 years it's taken. You going to get it sorted out now?
That is the goal. We are working very hard with First Nations. We think that it is something that our government has committed to, is reconciliation, is to working with First Nations. We've said time and time again, the Prime Minister has said that this is our most important relationship. We want to make sure that we do what's right. We want to make sure that the Supreme Court decision that affirmed the right for First Nations is implemented.
While you are having those conversations, I'm sure you know other First Nations on the East Coast have talked about starting their own fisheries too. If these negotiations are still ongoing and that happens, how do you intend to respond?
We will continue to work with them. I mean, we've reached out now to other First Nations communities to have these conversations, to start to get to the table with them. We're very hopeful. We're hearing positive response from a number of First Nations communities. I've had meetings with the chiefs, with all of the chiefs from the 13 in Nova Scotia, and those things are what's going to move us forward, and it's going to have to be respectful dialogue. It's going to have to be collaborative dialogue, and it's something that I think is we're on the right path now.
Are you ready to sit down at the table yourself yet?
I am. I've actually already been in touch with a number of the chiefs directly myself. Mm-hmm. I've spoken to the chief from Sabaganagati. I've spoken to the chief from Patlatek. I've spoken to the chief who's Chief Paul from KMK about this issue directly, and I think that we are in a good place to move these negotiations forward.
Okay, you talk about a potential solution, and I do want to ask you about an idea that was raised yesterday, one I know you're familiar with. Two Mi'kmaq senators and your Liberal colleague, MP Jaime Batiste, have proposed the creation of a new Atlantic First Nations Fisheries Authority to negotiate directly with the Crown rather than DFO working out band-by-band agreements. Could this be the answer? Are you considering establishing that kind of body?
So I want to first of all thank the senators and MP Batiste for their hard work on this, and because they have actually been in touch with me as well, and we've had good conversations around this. That plan is with the chiefs now, and it will be up to them to determine whether or not that is a path they want to follow. Of course, we want to work with the chiefs for whatever they see the best way forward for them.
But obviously it would require you to, I suppose, sign off on it. I don't know if that's quite the right term, but you're on board as long as the chiefs say it's something they're interested in?
I guess I don't want to prejudge any of what's going to come out of the negotiation process. The chiefs have that plan. It's something I understand that they're looking at, and then they will come to us if that is something that they think they want to go forward with.
Okay, I want to close by asking you about an op-ed that you recently wrote where you said it was only when you became an MP that you realized the gaps in your education around the treatment of Indigenous peoples in this country, the importance of treaty rights, reconciliation. And I wonder, being involved in this negotiation process, given what you said about how much you've learned since you become an MP, has this most recent process been a wake-up call for you, do you think?
I think since I've become an MP, I've seen, as I've said in the op-ed, huge gaps in my education. I think that we all have a responsibility to learn about what our treaties mean. I think we all have a responsibility to learn about the history of the First Nations in this country. And I think that, we're seeing a lot of that right now on the ground in Nova Scotia with people who are, standing up for Mi'kmaq, right? With fishers who now are understanding what the implementation of that right means. And I think it's something that we as a country have to obviously learn more about, and we should all be embracing and learning from the First Nations and what they have gone through over the last century and a half.
But you yourself, earlier on in this negotiation, you were saying no commercial fishing outside of the fishery season. Now you're writing this op-ed telling Canadians that they should read the treaties and understand where things come from. You certainly seem to have had your eyes opened as well.
I think that the First Nations have been very helpful to me in dealing with them directly, in talking to them, in understanding their rights. And I think that, all Canadians should be taking those lessons.
Okay, we thank you for your time today, Minister Jordan.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.